Hello and welcome everyone to your event today from Brighton Data Forum. My name is Andy and I want to welcome you to the Brighton Eagle Lab. We are here to help and support businesses grow and scale. But before I get on to that, just a little bit of housekeeping that we have to go through. If you need the toilets, just through the door and follow the stairs down, and they're just on the left-hand side. There shouldn't be today a fire drill. If there is, out the front door, over to the Joker pub, and we will be in there. So Eagle Labs, just to let you know the history. So we have been going now for 9 years. We are supported by Barclays, and you are in an old Barclays branch here. As you can see, we now have 42 labs across the country. So we are in partnership with quite a few co-working sites, including X and Y, the Foundry, and also Network East, not Network East, FreedomWorks, Dover and Hove and Worthing. Over the time, 38,000 businesses have attended our events. So this is all in 2024. And we've actually supported 17,000 businesses. So this is whether we've offered them mentoring or they've gone on one of our accelerator programs. Everything that we do, is to help and support your business grow and scale. So if this is something that you would like to know more information about, come and speak to me. It's free to join. So everything that I've just talked about, accelerator programs and mentoring, you can have for free. Okay. As we go through, one of the other things that we can do, we have our Eagle Labs Academy. Okay. This has been set up as a little bit of a learning platform. Okay. Everything that we have on there is to help you and your business to gain the knowledge to move your business forward. So again, there's a QR code on the banner. Scan it. It's free to use as well. So just go on, log on, and go through those bits of training. If you've got an idea, it will take you through those stages that you need to do to get your business on the road. So anything else that you need, come and speak to me. Enjoy tonight. It's going to be a great event. I'm now going to hand you over to Oscar.
Yeah, give it up. Give it up to us. Well, hello. And hello to our remote audience. Just a note for you here in the room that this is being recorded and being photographed. Please let me or a member of the Silicon Brighton team know if you're uncomfortable with that. So let me introduce you to the Brighton Data Forum, because there's a bunch of new faces here, which is really rewarding to see. We are for 6 years now in this format. 7 years if you count our earlier stint in meeting in pubs. We are a networking, skill sharing, and socializing community of data professionals, broadly defined. Data being all aspects of the data professions, anything from engineering, data science, and ethics, visualization, strategy, you name it, the full range of the data topic, and professionals from any stratum of the organization, from the intern to the executive suite. We especially welcome a participation from students and enthusiasts about data, about the data profession. Our home address is at meetup.com, and I think you all signed up to this event from there. So that's where you'll find us. But we also have this summer house over at Slack, where we continue the conversation in between the regular events. Our regular events are at the odd-numbered months, last Wednesday of the odd-numbered months. And we sometimes, or whenever we can get around to it, we'll have special events in between. I am going to start here looking for Mehmet, because Mehmet's been looking through past our 6 years And he put this slide together and has a little bit of a story to tell you about the forum.
Thanks, Oscar. Hi, everyone. It is great to see most of you. I guess I've seen some new faces, so it's great to see. Today I have some quick, not so funny, but a little bit boring stats from the Brighton Data Forum attendance. As you can see in the top left side, yeah, you can see our top active members, so which is Andrew, Nigel, and Sin. Unfortunately, I cannot see any of them in here because probably they are affected from the bad weather outside, so that might be a possible reason. But I guess we need to deliver some kind of type of loyalty card to our attendees so they can keep it. And if they join the events, 10 events in a row, maybe they can get their free pints after the event. How does that? And when we check the location in the middle side, so as we can see, obviously the Brighton is coming top, but surprisingly London is coming the second place. So I assume we have some stalkers from London. They are just committing from over there to come to see and join our events. And obviously we have some mighty attendees from all over, from the Holmer, Worthing, Crawley, and even from Burgess Hill. And when it comes to the new membership number, as you can see, some downs and spikes. Obviously, in the first quarter of the 2022, there are just 13 people attended and joined in the group, and kudos to those brave people during that hard time. And there is a spike in the first quarter of the 2023. So in the last quarters, we are doing a little bit in average way. So we need to increase our audience. And some quick stats, as you can see, we have 273 active members in the last year, and which means I think we are keeping attracting lots of people around Brighton and Sussex, but we are just keeping almost a fifth of them as an active member. And when it comes to members joined, we have also 258 people, which makes almost 5 people for each week is joining our meetup groups, which makes a great number. But when it comes to the median membership duration, so it looks like we have most of the people are joining our events they are just joined the club, and it looks like we are seeing all the time in a fresh face in our events. And when it comes to the average attendance, average events of attended, it looks like we just almost got 1 or 2 events for each participants. That's why we need to keep our retention for the participants in the upcoming events. So this is a alarming signs for us. Okay, that's everything from me. And it looks like we have a steady growing numbers, and obviously we have a different diverse locations from the different people. And I wish 2025 will be better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mehmet, and that constitutes our 6th birthday celebration. The forum has, over the last 2.5 years or so, been generously sponsored by Richmond Mead Consulting. And if you came in here and enjoyed some refreshments in the beginning, you go ahead and give them a warm hand in gratitude for their support. Thank you. And I'll also add that Brighton Data Consulting, which is internationally renowned analytics and consulting house and a knowledge center on all things Oracle, has a fantastic blog for just any data professional to keep an eye on. And they're headquartered right here in Brighton. So I think that helps a bit. Next up, I just want to tell you about our supporter, Silicon Brighton. Well, actually, Cameron is here to tell you about the supporter, Silicon Brighton. I have a fantastic event on 4th of July. And the Brighton Data Forum is scheduled to have a stand there. That means that you, the members of the Brighton Data Forum, can come now with an idea that you would like to present at this fantastic event, and we could be your conduit onto that stage. So give that a thought. While Cameron, thank you, come and tell us about Silicon Brighton.
Well, thank you, Oscar. Well, yes, Oscar's kind of covered a lot about Evolve, but I suppose I can give a good framework of what Silicon Brighton is. We are the proud hosts of the digital tech sector in Brighton and Hove. We support a lot of different meetup groups, Brighton Data Forum being a very special one indeed, but I can see a few other meetup organisers in the room as well. So we support proudly a lot of different meetups. But our flagship event, Evolve, is happening on July 4th at the Brighton Dome, which is going to be a fantastic day. We're calling it the meetup of all meetups. We're going to get representation from everyone of all of our meetups and condense it into one brilliant day. Unfortunately, Andy is on holiday, but we'll make up for that, won't we? And yeah, so you can attend, you can exhibit, and you can sponsor via the QR code here. We've got student tickets available as well, and we don't really want to turn anyone away, so we're looking to make it as accessible as possible, like all of our groups are. Which leads me on to our groups. So mentioning the other groups before, Brighton Data Forum is not in a vacuum. We have so many other brilliant groups on par with Data Forum. So if you find any group or any sort of tag here that you like the look of, please come to one of our other events. Like Oscar said, majority of them are on Meetup, but if not, they are only a Google away. We just want to say a huge thank you to our supporters. They look after us in so many different ways, whether that's financially or with the spaces they offer. Thank you, Eagle Labs. Yeah, so brilliant support from the community. All of the community supports us, we support them, and it's a back and forth relationship that's fantastic. We want to shout out a huge thank you to our sponsors, of which I think we're doing a few events at some of those locations soon. You can stay up to date with all of our activities on this link tree. Specifically, what I want to talk about is our Slack channel, which you can find here. Conversations don't stop here after the Q&As. If you've got an idea and you want to post it, please throw it on there. We get things like job opportunities, loads of stuff coming up on there, and just general fun community events. I believe that's my last slide. Oh, no, future events. So we've got AI and Consciousness coming up on Wednesday 5th. Following up, we have the AWS Monday meetup, a very special one. I had a bit of a scheduling thing there. So the 17th with Mateus Guimaraes, I believe, for the event recap where they all went to Las Vegas and had a lot of AWS fun. I know John and Carl have been podcasting that and interviewing people, so that's really fun on their end of it. Jumping over to Brighton R, we'll be here at Eagle Labs. And yeah, that'll be brilliant too. And I believe there's one more. Yeah, Oscar's telling me one more. The Java, roll it back. There we go. Got a bit trigger happy. Oh, there we go. And JavaScript Social. But yes, Oscar, which order we do? All right. I'm going to try pressing one more. I was doing so well. Is this back to you? Okay. Back to Oscar.
Well, speaking of future events, I wanted to tell you about a special event that we're planning. So like I said, we meet at the odd-numbered months, last Wednesday of the odd-numbered month. That's when we're always on. Occasionally, we do special events. We've done one on AI in society. We've done special training sessions, and we've done a handful of these. And we are changing a little bit for this next one in February. It's a completely new type of event. It is a proper forum event where the community talks to the community. We won't have a presenter. We will have a professional facilitator at this event. And the topic here will not be a technical one. Rather, it's an organizational, structural, strategic one. We'll be discussing, for instance, the structure of data functions in organizations, the best organizational formats for data. Where does data belong? What is the role of the CDO in 2025? There's more information to be shared about this via the Meetup community. So you'll be getting an email through the Meetup in short succession. All I can say right now is we have the date, we have the location, we have the facilitator. It's all coming together. And I just wanted you to know it first, and then you'll be getting notifications about it. I really hope you can make it there. Anybody who has ambitions to tackle data profession at a strategic level, you really should use this opportunity and be there. And even if you don't, consider whether your boss should be here, and please pass it on to them. Right. But now we can switch gears, and now we can start talking about artificial intelligence. This is why you came here, right? We want to address this. Artificial intelligence, one of the problems with it is that it's changing so rapidly. There is a flavor of the month changing every week. Currently, it's DeepSeek. Who knows will it be in 3 weeks? But there is a long parade of these challengers to the throne that makes choosing tooling quite complex and quite difficult for beginners who are trying to get their first start in something practical and something useful out of these generative AI tools. They lie there at your feet, but can you do something that it actually moves the needle for you and for your organization, for your job? Well, that is quite the challenge. Luckily, we have an absolute expert on that issue here to tell us how to choose the right tool for AI agent development. So, without further ado, please welcome Lewis Baker to the stage.
Thank you very much. Perfect intro there. What I'm going to try and do today is cut through the crap and all the hype around AI and break it down to its fundamentals, which sounds a little bit sort of like ambitious, but we'll try and get there. So, first of all, I'm just going to do a quick intro to who I am. So I'm Lewis Baker. I'm the Chief of Ops at Rittman Analytics, not Rittman Mead, just to clear that up. And I work in like consulting projects. I use AI a lot now, and we've used it in anger as well. So hopefully today I can sort of prod you in the right direction with that exposure. So the agenda for today. So first of all, I'm going to be setting the foundation. And to do that, I'm going to be introducing an information theory framework. Trying to introduce a scientific approach to tool selection. So Oscar, where you were saying there, like the flavor of the moment changes all the time at the moment. Every day there's a new model with wider context windows, new orchestration tools for agents, etc. I think that there's a recipe to sort of see through the hype on that and use scientific approaches to do so. The core concepts that I'm going to be exploring are entropy, Maxwell's daemon, logical depth, and Exformation. I'm not going to labor these, but these are fundamental concepts in information theory that have been introduced since the 1920s. And they really shed an insight into like selection criteria of what makes you handle information well. I'm then going to go through a practical implementation of these concepts. I'm going to be running through QA agents, LangSmith and LangGraph, which are really robust tooling that allow you to use AI agents in a scalable and traceable way, and a way in which you can evaluate them. And then I'm going to look at some results and future outlooks. So I've crunched the numbers on these AI approaches and how they compare to just standard RAG approaches or standard LLM calls. And I'll share that with you so you can make some judgment calls whether learning this stuff is actually worth your time and your business's time. And then I'm going to do some looking ahead. And I'm going to try and make some forecasts about like where I would spend my time over the next 12 months. Where would I invest efforts in learning new skills? So, here's the sort of like the main gist of what I want to get across. I'm going to try and put forward a framework where you can move towards intuition-based tool selection. And there's like information theory is my hunch on like what we should be looking to guide us in that direction. So information theory provides us with fundamental principles and how information flows throughout systems. It provides us information about complexity and how to best handle it. And this goes back to when they were trying to introduce like, the telegram and Morse code. How to measure and optimize information processing and how to validate our choices with proper scientific grounding. And I'm also going to be looking forward to the path forward. Like, how do we design intentional systems that are deliberate and well thought out? What tools can help you do that? And how can we create solutions that are both powerful and efficient? So LLMs are probabilistic. They can actually cost a fortune to run. And what are some ways that we can make them a lot more effective? And how do we validate that through quantifiable results? And LangSmith and LangGraph are going to be really vital to that. So what we're looking to do is build value beyond traditional engineering. So like, why are we even thinking about using AI? It's because there's the promise that we can extract more value in the market from it. And when you really you think about the problem focus here, there are some problems in data at the moment. Traditional data teams spend most of their time maintaining systems. So you get to this critical point in like data infrastructure where you've built it out, you've got the first release out the door, and all of a sudden that becomes an overhead. And what that means is that the last 20% of the value that you derive from a data function very rarely actually gets unlocked. So when you build out those pipelines, you're maintaining infrastructure, you spend all your time doing that. The actual analysis, the insight, and the business value is lost in the toil of maintaining what's been built in the past. And what this means is that business outcomes get deprioritized because you're dealing with your DBT errors, you're trying to build out new data models, you're trying to manage data quality, et cetera, et cetera. And that means that, unfortunately, over the last 3 or 4 years, there have been a lot of questions about the value that data functions actually provide. When there are financial hardship, often those engineers get lost because they're not actually providing the business value that they need to. And I think that AI agents do provide a solution to this, but they do need a framework. And what I'm going to be putting forward is trying to see where the actual value is amongst the hype, move beyond analytics engineering, like dimensional modeling, like the inheritance of software engineering principles. Actually, our jobs have become a lot harder. And like, how do we move beyond that? And what scientific principles can we use to guide us in the right direction? And why does this matter now? So as I've said, data functions need to provide value. It's a tough climate. We're well-paid individuals, so we need to go and do that for the businesses we work in. Traditional skills are now a lot less sought after. The things that got us employed 2 years ago, knowing DBT, knowing Airflow, knowing version control, heads of data's decision makers don't care about that as much anymore. They've been commoditized. And understanding information theory principles could provide you with the competitive advantage that helps you maintain relevant. I'm always conscious as a person who works in data, like every 2 years, I need to be recycling my skill set and staying ahead of the curve. So I'm going to try and keep this as light as possible, but these are some heavy concepts. So what are the fundamental concepts that can actually help us make better decisions? So entropy is one of them, and it shows us why data gets messy. And this is the second law of thermodynamics, right? That entropy emerges within closed systems. It's a universal principle, and it affects us in our day-to-day lives in ways that you will no doubt have felt. We've got this daemon, which is a thought experiment that came through in the previous century called Maxwell's daemon. And the idea behind that is that you've got this small daemon that can manage entropy for you. And maybe AI can be that in the future. We've got a notion called logical depth that was introduced by Charles Bennett. It's not that well known, but it's intrinsic. It's incredibly important when building out data platforms. And then a notion of exformation, which is now more relevant than it's ever been, because there are quintillions of bits of information in the modern data warehouse, but you only need 3 bits of information to make a decision. And our cognition is all built around exformation. It's all about the things that we filter out, not the things that we pay attention to. So in the world of big data and large language models, what actually matters is what you exclude. So I'll be giving an overview of that. So what we'll see is how this sequence informs better agent design. So I'm going to actually ground this theory in practical applications. I'm going to show the real performance improvements, which can be huge. They can be cost saving and like give much richer accuracy. And then I'm going to go over tooling. So entropy. A lot of people will be familiar with it, but I'll quickly just run through it. So there's a natural tendency for systems to move from a state of order towards chaos. And the nicest analogy for this is if you were to take Shakespearean prose, the chance of you flicking a piece of chalk on the floor, it bouncing off a whiteboard and writing that is very low. So like rich information states are very unlikely. Curation of information is improbable actually, and it's only through heat that you get a reduction in entropy. So we animals eat plants that get heat from the sun, and that's what keeps us together. Data systems are no different. You know, like we as individuals have been the things that provide heat to these systems to maintain order, but there's now silicon-based agents that can do that. So that's a fundamental change to the paradigm. So without intervention, information loses meaning, right? And we've all experienced that in data systems. You know, like you don't maintain your pipelines, entropy emerges, data quality decreases. And why this matters now is because data volumes are growing exponentially. So with the introduction of tools like, you know, Segment, Rudderstack, huge event buses, we've got more data than we've ever had access to, which means we're going to have more entropy unless we manage it. Probabilistic systems struggle to handle disorder. So in order for you to get the most out of LLMs and AI, you need to have like low entropy states in order to get high value out of them. And AI systems need structured, meaningful input. So you knowing how to manage entropy is going to get you a much better throughput from it. So what I'm going to be running through later is how to fight entropy through a deliberate structure, how to create value for intelligent reduction, and how to measure entropy with systems and tooling. Now, Maxwell's daemon, another fundamental concept. So when everyone became aware of this notion of entropy, someone thought, well, if we had an intelligent daemon that could handle the transition of the microstate, so particles throughout a system, you could, in theory, stop entropy from emerging. You could have perpetual motion. You could have radiators that had constant heat. And that's what data professionals or budget holders want from a data function. They don't want to spend more money to have low entropy states and get business value from it. They want to spend less energy. And that's Maxwell's daemon. And we're all, as engineers, Maxwell's daemon. What we do is through lines of code and CI/CD, we try and implement things that decrease entropy. So having an understanding of like these principles that have good scientific bases give us a bit of intellectual edge. It's all about knowing what to let through, because Maxwell's daemon here, what he does is he moves particles around very deliberately, and that reduces entropy. Now, why this matters now is that AI agents face the same issues as the daemon. They face the same issues that we face, of trying to know what to let in and what to let out. And it must make intelligent choices about information, and processing everything isn't feasible or valuable. So if you just put everything through to an LLM, like, you know, put it over a Google Cloud storage on such a data, you're going to get very bad results from that. So we're going to see how our methodology helps implement Maxwell's daemon as well. And there's another fundamental concept, which is logical depth. And this has kind of been forgotten about to the sands of time a little bit, but Charles Bennett came out of it. And it's the notion that with computational time, logical depth increases over time. And a perfect example of this from the natural world is DNA. So our DNA has a bunch of computational history that makes it efficient. So the reason that we don't just get eaten by a lion or fall over and like break our hip and die or something is because that's all happened before, and our DNA encapsulates all of the failed experiments that go into that. Now, the density of that time, that information is lost to time, but it's stored in the algorithms it produces. So this notion of logical depth is fundamental to producing good data solutions. And on that graph there, what you can see is that if you've got random complexity, the information value actually decreases over time. So like without a deliberate structure or Maxwell's daemon, that's what you'd end up achieving, is just effectively chaos. If you do that deliberately, the logical depth increases over time. So your DBT models impart meaning in that information. And simple patterns, it's fairly linear. So this notion of imparting logical depth is really important, because for an end user, when they've imparted all their business logic through those transformations and all the idiosyncratic rules that they have, you're imparting meaning into that, but you're also crunching it down. So in theory, you could have something that's 3 bits of information that contains more value than something that contains a quintillion bits of information. And we've all known this throughout our careers, that it's actually how you massage the data that gives it value, but this gives it a scientific basis. And these concepts really help you to conceptualize, like, why is it that thing that you experience happens? And then there's exformation, which is another really interesting concept. Again, one that isn't very frequently spoken about, which is that actually what we should be doing is deliberately discarding information. There's meaning in absence of data. A perfect anecdote for this is Bell Labs were doing, and there's a paper on this actually, called What's the Weight of Information? And if you, I don't know, had like a son or a child and they went away to university, and let's say that if they phoned you, it costs them money, you know, going back a couple of decades here. If you said to them, don't call me if nothing's wrong, if they don't call you, that imparts a tremendous amount of information, often more information than they've actually told you and told you about their day. And that's a perfect excuse of how, like, the absence of information, the deliberate absence of information, can communicate more than the presence of information. And if you think about the world we live in today, where, you know, like, there's an abundance of information, actually it's what you choose to expose your LLMs to and the logical depth that you impose on them that really gives them the value. And these are all things that are, like, quite novel, and I haven't heard many companies or, like, data professionals think about this in the past, because data modeling's always been a little bit of a dark art. It kind of stopped with Kimball and never moved any further forward. But these are really good frameworks to think about it in a slightly more scientific way. And this is how our brains work. You know, 9 million bits of information enter our sensors in any second, but only 50 bits actually reach our consciousness. So our neural architecture is all about filtering out information. And there's no reason that our data system shouldn't be any different, because we're a prime example of successful information processing. Your data function in your brain are trying to do exactly the same thing, which is make sense of the world. So what we're going to do is I'm going to provide some illustrations of how I impart this in our tooling. Last one, I promise, on the abstract conceptual stuff. This is Miller's law. So when we're thinking about AI solutions, what we're also thinking about is the human, right, that's interacting with this. So roughly speaking, there's a rule of thumb, which is you can hold 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information in your consciousness at any given time, right? So if I gave you a shopping list to go and buy some things, if I tell you the 10th item, you're going to forget the first. Your data warehouses have a lot more than 7 bits of information in them. So what we should be trying to do is come up with agentic solutions that boil it down to its essentials. We only need 3 bits of information to make a decision. And that's really important. You know, for your end users and your data consumers, that's what I think you should be aiming for, 3 bits of information. And it takes a lot of curation, takes a lot of deliberation. But this is really worth thinking about. This is what, like, your end users experience at the end of the day. So try to keep that as brief as possible. We're now going to get into the applied theory, right? How do we actually get this done? So, information theory and agentic architecture. The world's changing a little bit in data systems. What used to be the finished product, your DBT data warehouse, is now just the beginning. It's the foundation layer. In there, you've got your transformations, so idiosyncratic business logic, cleaning stuff up. You've got primary substance, so the ontologies that live within that data model. I'm wearing a grey shirt at the moment. The fact it's a shirt is the primary substance. The predicate is the color that it is. So what we want to do in that foundation layer is, like, fix out the autonomies in it. And then in the foundation layer, we've got semantic rules and relationships. So, like, how do these entities and ontologies connect to each other? That makes something that kind of looks like objects in the natural world, where, like, they're logically grouped, sort of thing like Aristotle's categories or whatever, what the Greeks were trying to, like, filter out what things were and how they worked. And then on top of that, you've got your symbolic layer. So this is the world in which we occupy most of our time, like ideas and symbols and signs, where we derive meaning. Knowledge graphs are the only thing that really handle this particularly well at the moment. So moving forward from the foundation layer of what we used to deliver, that's something that we're going to build out. And then the graph characteristics. On top of that, you've got GraphRAG, right? So now you've got your foundation layer and a symbolic layer. That is far more optimized for LLMs to query because it's symbolic, and LLMs use language which is symbolic. So this provides some real performance gains. And then you've got the human interface, right? 7 bits plus or minus 2 for what people want to consume, and then 3 bits of action. So that's the vision behind what we've produced here, and all of it sort of. This is what you get when you get a philosophy student doing software engineering. Like, you have to sort of, like, for me to motivate myself, I always need some sort of bigger thing. So that's how everything links together. And there are the arrows to show it. You've got to sprinkle a few PowerPoint animations. They're still relevant. Right. So how AI agents can help? So what we've done is we've gone back to a drawing board and we thought, well, what constitutes a good data platform? How do we make objective decisions instead of just, oh, well, there's a new LLM model or there's a new agentic framework? So we've thought about, like, what do we want to design? How are we going to design it? And this is what we've done. So on the foundation layer, we've got a few helpers now. We've got a QA agent. So what this does is it goes through your data and it checks it against semantic assumptions that an end user will have. And this isn't just like unicity, cardinality, referential integrity. This is, would a marketing persona like the dimension to look like this? Much more nuanced. This sort of like the checking that things feel right, and agents can really help with that. We've got Drowty Docs, which goes through your warehouse and trolls it, and an LLM will annotate the data to give it richness and definition, which again helps LLMs. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build a semantic layer that if an LLM looks, no, foundation layer, that if an LLM looks at it, it can extract more meaningful information, imparting logical depth. And then we've got Drowty DBT, which actually just adds standardized tests. So that's our foundation layer. And these agents go through and they help us expedite our sort of development process. They enrich, they check what we're doing. They're like a co-pilot or a bicycle of the mind sort of thing, right? We've then got the symbolic layer. So now we've made this really nice foundation layer where a human or an LLM can infer the shape of it. We've got an agent that goes and builds out a knowledge graph. So because it's logically structured, through inference, it can start to build out ontologies, verbs, and nouns, which make it easier to navigate. We've got Drowty Retrieval, which then puts a chatbot agent to query the knowledge graph and then extract meaningful information, and then the human interface. Now, there's a key distinction here. So we're using AI agents and LLMs, and I just want to clarify like what the differences are. So an AI agent, like they act independently based on goals. So rather than just giving it a prompt, I want you to achieve these things. So that's a fundamental differentiation. They track context and memory across tasks. So if you just call an LLM, it does a prompt, everything else is lost to the world. This stores and caches that memory across the tasks. They're designed to achieve objectives and prioritize. So you've kind of got to think about them differently. It's like having a junior or like an intern in a business. You've got to instruct them what you want them to do, and you've got to be very deliberate in the way you do that. They adapt and improve from interactions or feedback, so you can have like a human-in-the-loop interface in this, so that you can help the agents make better decisions. And then also, the most fundamental thing is you assign a bunch of tools. So like you would have macros or like util functions in a Python application, like you end up building a set of tooling agents that you can just deploy and import. So there's reusability there as well. Now, for LLM solutions, they're pretty good because they're so simple. You know, like you just give it a prompt. If it's something simple, like just generating and annotating text, they spin up quickly. They're cheaper because they're doing less complex reasoning. And yeah, just faster. They're quick and dirty, and they get the job done. And there's sort of a right and a wrong time. That's my decision criteria for when I use them. So implementation, QA agents. So this is the anatomy of a QA agent, right? So in what we've done in this instance is we've got YAML over here that gives parameters to an agent. It then spins off a process for a LangChain layer to initiate. So there's a prompt template. It then fires off to chat OpenAI, and then there's a structured input. And this is all traced by the LangSmith layer. So what this means is LangChain sort of handles the running of the prompts or the agents, and then the LangSmith lets you evaluate how they're doing. This is critical, right? You know, you think like pre-DBT or pre-Data Forum, you didn't really know how your transformations were like performing or what the dependencies were. LangSmith gives you that observability. So you can go and go, oh my God, I've just spent like £100 on tokens or something. I need to go refine that. So it gives you that observability. And then LangGraph is very similar to DBT. It gives you that DAG of like, what are the steps that my agents went through? Because it's probabilistic. Like they kind of take the path they want to take, and then it gives you insight into that. So it allows you to like figure out what's actually going on under the hood. And then these things are kind of weird because they're agents. They're not completely linear. So the relationship between these things firing off, again, are kind of sometimes a bit random. The way that you define your code can inform it a little bit. But I've tried to demonstrate how it's not just like a direct DAG, and it's a kind of a little bit cyclical. So what this means is that in your foundation layer, the QA agent will go and try and figure out what's going on. And again, there's the definition of what those tools do. So this is it in motion. There should be a YouTube video in here, but it's not coming. Oh, here we go. Right, so this is a QA agent. So we've got these assumptions here. You can see that some of them are like, you know, ensure it does not expose PII. and it matches a marketing persona. It's pretty damn quick. You'll fire it using Drowty QA, and it will go and deploy a bunch of agents and test your data for you. So what this means is that rather than you having to contact the person in marketing who's asked for this feature to be released, and they QA it, and then they don't really QA it, and they say, looks good to me, and it gets put to production, and then they show it to the CMO, and the CMO looks at it and goes, that's wrong, and they go, it's wrong. This QA agent goes and actually does a thorough proper check before you give it to the marketing person. So it's better than human QA. I can guarantee it. Costs a bit of money, but it really expedites the process. And we run this before we're doing a pull request, and it means that like the chances of us hitting the nail on the head the first time is far greater. It's actually really bloody good. It's one of those things where like it's a useful QA agent, and you can like use this Git if you want to use it. So that'll go and QA it. But what I'm trying to show you here is that every problem you experience, you can produce something like that, and it will solve it for you. Now, this is the output, sort of enlarged, right? And it's really bloody cool because it's gone through and it's seen like, oh, it doesn't expose any PII. This format is also suitable for a marketing persona as it allows for individual identification of customers. It's thinking about things that I wouldn't think about to like check that I'm meeting end user satisfaction, right? And then it provides you some qualitative information about what data it's experiencing, but we're also asking it here to check over ISO 8000 standards, which is like a globally recognized data quality standard. So it's stuff that you couldn't traditionally do when you're testing data. So that's pretty useful. Now, what LangSmith provides is the ability to then trace that. So it will send it over to a web server, and then the decision making that the agents went through to provide that QA is visible. So then if there's an issue with the output, you can go and diagnose it. It will give you information about the amount of tokens that were used. You could figure out how much money it's cost you, how performant it is, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you observability over what your agents are doing, which is really important when you're putting things into production. And I think that there's, I mean, this isn't going to blow anyone's mind, but you can see here that kind of it's reminiscent of like the same sort of stuff that DBT gave you, you know, like DBT docs, observability over what your agents are doing. Really, really very useful. Right, so if I now move on, LangGraph, this combines with LangSmith and gives you the route that the agents took when they made their sort of deployments and decision making. So you can see here that they decided to load the YAML, QA the data, provide a summary, and then end the node. And that again gives you observability over the steps that were taken. And then just to show you how this is done differently, a simple LLM call would look like this. So this is an LLM that we deploy called DBT Docs, and what it does is it will troll through your data warehouse. It will see if there aren't any definitions, and then it will generate some for you. So it's another helper that can sit aside the rest of the modules. Again, really useful. This is something that's really boring to do manually. You know, go in and annotate every field. It's one of those things that just doesn't get done. So again, thinking about like, well, how can we pragmatically use agents? This is a really good example. So it will go through and do things that people don't traditionally do. And you can see that they're generating there. Now, the plot thickens. I'm conscious of time now. Agent Knowledge Graph Builder. So this is an ontology agent. So you've done all that cleaning and you've enriched the data using agents, and they've saved you a bunch of time and energy and made things more accurate. This now sets up other agents to do more interesting things. So in here, we've got that data that the agents have helped build in the foundation layer, and they're now doing schema extraction, relationship generation, and graph creation. And what this produces, I'm going to skip over this one because it's just a video of a CLI again, but it produces something like this, which is a knowledge graph, right? So we've gone through, we've built out the foundation layer, put together our ontologies, put together some primary keys and foreign keys. That ontology agent will build this for you. So in here, you can see that you've got entities, which are nouns, and there are verbs, which are the relationships between those nouns, the verbs. And this is much better for LLMs to query for reasons that I'll go over very shortly. But this is fantastic if you're doing customer journeys, complex relationships. If you're trying to figure out what customers are doing, what's leading them to like buy things, high value items, or like build awareness, knowledge graphs are fantastic for that. So if we put this all together, what you've effectively got there is you've got the embedding generation, vector processing, and graph processing. So some like very important elements of this is the graph traversal. So when you build out a knowledge graph, an LLM can then look at the shape of that graph and traverse it. So if you normally give an agent your warehouse, it will look at a table, and that's about it. And maybe it could try and put some joins together, but it'd be through inference, and it's really performant. Where you've built out a knowledge graph, all of those nodes are strictly defined within a graph database. So when an LLM looks at getting you like information, it's aware of the shape of the information, the symbolic shape of it, which is huge. You know, like the amount is far greater. And then there's vector processing. So this is removing redundancy in the information. Thank you. And then we've got the context assembly, pattern recognition, and then eventually the LLM response. And here's the payoff. So this is standard RAG. In standard RAG, this is a query against an anonymized database on an e-commerce model. It tells us some stuff, you know, the average order value, last purchases, etc. Bit boring though, bit bland. Same data with a graph model, it gives you rich information. So it's got graph traversal. It can then, because it's got an awareness of like channels within the graph, it will come back and give you insight into that. Because knowledge graphs are really good at like figuring out relationships, it will then look at like email information and bring that into it. And the output is radically different, far richer, far more insightful, and it costs you less. So the cost per query is less in GraphRAG because it's more suitable for LLMs to query. The token usage is less, so it's costing you less again. The retrieval quality is higher, and the response time, like this is kind of interesting. The response time's actually a little bit higher, but it's because it's got that graph traversal to do. But you get, like the latency is a bit higher, but the result is far better and actually costs you less. So the payoffs are massive. A 33% token reduction compared to just querying like BigQuery directly, 33% cost savings. So you're getting better output and you're saving 33% on what you would on a standard LLM call, and the quality improvement's higher as well. So there's a little bit like the increase in time is definitely made up for in the quality and the cost saving. And if these are the sort of things that you can bring to your company through implementing it, if you can save 33% on like your Vertex bill or your OpenAI bill, that's quite big for a large data function. So slightly over. Wrapping up. So what we've gone over is the information theory network. So the way that we got to that more performant output is through knowing the tenets of information theory. We've used notions of entropy, logical depth, and human cognition, trying to get down to as close to those 3 bits as possible in order to make a decent product. The practical implementation, we've deployed QA agents, LangSmith and LangChain for optimization, and GraphRAG for the context-aware processing. And these are measurable outcomes. It paid off. You know, we went and did our scientific research. We came up with a hypothesis, and the results were very compelling. Now, final thoughts. So I think that stepping aside from the hype and actually just going back to like what Bell Labs were working on. You know, information theory. How does this stuff fundamentally work? Can help you find edge around the hype. Data Professionals Toolkit is expanding beyond traditional SQL and dimensional modeling. We all need to sort of have an opinion on this. If you go for an interview in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, these are the sort of things that might help you get that job because it's showing that you're thinking ahead of a curve. And also, if you could say, I can save you 33% on your on your LLM expenses, that might go down quite well. And while agents and LLMs add complexity to our solutions, their utility makes them impossible to ignore. You know, like they're kind of annoying. I used to like it when I was the only thing that could program. It's a bit annoying now that LLMs can do that and make other people better at it. But there's a payoff. You know, the bright side to it is that if you use that intelligently, it can make your life better. we all need to embrace this, really. It's not going away, and it's hard to cut through the hype. That's sort of my last thoughts on it.
Wow, thank you for that. Is this on? Yeah, thank you. Please, Lewis, would you be so kind to respond to a few questions?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. First of all, yeah, what an impressive talk. What a great talk. We're going to have a lot more data professional philosophers on stage coming in the future. But Cameron, can I ask if the remote audience has any questions? We'll start with them, if any. Well, that's a challenge to you, remote audience. I'd like to see some questions from you. We'll get back to you. Yeah, so go ahead and start typing. Meanwhile, anybody here in the room want to ask Lewis a question? Sorry. Yeah. Off we go.
Firstly, I just want to say that I'm really fascinated by this framework, and it's really great design that I've got to see today. A question is, can I have like integrate a web search or a web foraging way to also extract data from there and also turn it into a structured data through using this workflow?
Certainly, yeah. So using LangChain or LangSmith, what you could do is you could deploy like a web agent that could go and augment. So say if you've got a data warehouse or a knowledge graph, it could then enrich that with something from DuckDuckGo or Google or whatever else. So that's certainly possible. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Oh, the next question right over here.
Hi, yeah, that was an amazing, fascinating talk. I was a bit curious about verification, though. So with these multiple chained agents, say, for example, the ontology graph, how do you verify that that's actually what's going on, and then that's being used for lots of other things? How do you verify that any of it is actually correct?
Yeah, it's the most annoying thing about LLMs is like they're probabilistic. So like the thing that's emerging now is evaluations. So things like Pedantic and Logfire are introducing, and LangSmith and LangChain provide you that. What's interesting is it actually goes back to information theory, where a lot of it's logarithmic. So managing like the way of measuring entropy is through logarithms. And I suspect that down the line, they'll, like, if you could provide a layer of abstraction over like complex logarithms that like engineers could use, that would probably be the answer to it. At that moment, you've got evaluations. But it's not as robust as deterministic programming. You know, like it relies on actually all of the things that I've been speaking about, like getting your ontology sorted, getting the logical depth in there. If you're really good at doing that, the LLM will have a really good output, and if you're bad, it will just have a crap output. So yeah. But really good question.
Thank you for that. Oh yeah, Ash, you're next.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. One thing I was interested in is how much, obviously you're saving money at the end stage, but how much investment do you need to put in to actually do the initial processing of the data, and then also keeping on top of new data as it comes in? Because if you've got a big database, there's stuff coming in like constantly.
Yeah. Really good question. And I was saying to my colleague Olivier yesterday, like, this is the perfect solution if it wasn't so bloody complicated. You know, like if you're hiring an engineer and it's like, well, you've actually got to know how to use DBT and then some sort of orchestrator, but I'd also like you to know about knowledge graphs and LangSmith and LangChain, and it all becomes like conceptually quite heady. It's a big problem. You know, like it's sort of like a Porsche or something where like it performs amazingly, but like if you want to find someone who can repair it, you've got to find a specialist there, and it's going to cost you a fortune. So it's highly optimized and it's like really well engineered, but it's bloody complicated. So that, yeah, that's what I said to Olivia. I'd almost recommend no company actually goes and does this at the moment.
Couldn't you get an agent? So hypothetically speaking, couldn't you get an agent to do that maintenance for you? things that's complicated and sort of difficult.
Yeah, like the tooling itself obfuscates sort of complexity. Like working with the Open normally is quite like learning cipher, like producing knowledge graphs are really labor intensive, and that element basically filters through, like produces it for you. And so it does remove a lot of complexity. The thing that I would also say is, how do you handle incrementality and massive volume of data? That becomes quite challenging. Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here, but DeepMind, how would DeepMind affect your thinking on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been too preoccupied with Shannon's law.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose, but yeah, it's yeah, okay.
Yeah, it can be interesting. I mean,
Lowering the cost of I mean, the speed of it is. I wonder how much. I mean, I wonder how much the RAG. Sorry, the DeepSeek. Sorry, what did I say? DeepMind or whatever. Yeah. How central is the kind of the graph database part to it?
if you want, it's a very compelling proposition because of like all the reasons that I showed around like the query and like the accuracy of the retrieval, the decrease in token usage, and the decrease in cost. Like that's what makes it so compelling. It's a and Google recently moved over to a knowledge graph based for its recommendation. So the thing now it like reads your mind. You know, you've got to Google something. Like, how did you know that nuanced thing that was going to be the end of the thing? That graph reversal. So it's if a business can use it and you're trying to sort of like produce a recommendation engine or smooth out your customer journey, could have a huge payoff. But again, going back to the other person's question, you've got to find people who know it and can actually like extract the value from it and implement it. Well, yeah. There's one based in Brighton, Rittman Analytics. Yeah, and we're opinionated about it as well.
1 second.
So there's always been kind of a difficulty in the clear communication between the business side of a company and the technical side. It has now the kind of the growth of LLMs, is that making it more difficult in terms of having the business side understanding what the opportunities are and not becoming too overexcited in the potential, etc. You know, lots of. I just wondered if you're finding it's difficult to.
Yeah, it's such a mixed bag because
Right.
Some companies are really pessimistic. Like enterprise customers can be like very skeptical about it. Startups think that like this is going to enable our growth and is like, you know, the sky's the limit. And then obviously all of the vendors promote this because it's where all the hype's at the moment. So there's a tremendous amount of noise. I think for me, the big opportunities is it's like the communication. So the next edition that we're going to make on the QA agent is a chatbot. So you'd send it to the end user, and they'd have a discourse with a chatbot, and then that would feed the assumptions to the QA agent, so that all the conversations that you wouldn't normally have time for, would like agents could handle. And I think that's where like there's some value to be had from all of this. But it's hard to align expectations. But also, I suppose as data professionals, you kind of want to sell people on the dream as well. So not be too pessimistic. So it's a balancing act, yeah, which is the most political thing I've ever said. Like as in like middle on the fence.
But is it getting more difficult as things become more complex?
I don't know. A lot of the customers that we deal with are still in the like it's still very fundamental. You know, like, a lot of it still just goes back to trying to, you know, instill decent processes, get your data model sorted, and improve data quality. Like it's a lot of the tough conversations are still the same tough conversations that we've been having. Yeah.
Oh, 1 second.
A lateral question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the talk. I was wondering, did you study semiotics in university?
I'm a big fan of Wittgenstein and anything linguistic. So yeah.
And do you think that that background has helped you? And how?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, like the things that philosophers are trying to struggle with, you know, for millennia, were the same things that we all struggle with daily. So whether it be ontologies, linguistics, information theory, It's all so deeply relevant, and it actually has given me a load of consulting edge, to be honest. But yeah,
I noticed that the terminology was coming from kind of that side of the fence.
Yeah,
at times.
Yeah, but a lot of everything that we do has a lot of it's been born out of business processes. So data is a discipline. Like you don't go to university and study data, and it's like a STEM course or something. Most people learn it on the job, which means that it's often very like you got scientific and insight. What's the plagiarization of science? It's like scientific or something. You know, it's like playing science. And a lot of what engineers do is, unfortunately, play science because I'm a literacy student, or like a philosophy student. So like anyway, yeah. But the ways of thinking in the critical tradition definitely helps, I think.
More questions for Lewis?
No.
Any questions from the remote audience? Would you like to share a comment from the comment? Okay.
Cool.
One more question up here.
I was curious if you had any thoughts about developing your own local language models for sort of fine tuning rather than obviously the high costs of going using API or something.
Yeah, we have looked into open source variants, but we haven't taken it any further because I know, like, you know, Hugging Face and whatever. Like, I suspect that and I could talk about this, right? But like, it's like, how do you monetize language models when it's all going to become like very open source at some point? And yeah, like the hot takes on this is that it's actually the language model isn't what's important, it's the APIs that are important. So like the actual chat interface with LLMs isn't going to be a huge source of revenue for these firms. It's the APIs that they expose. But I find that all kind of a little bit tenuous as well, to be honest, because if you're looking at this at an enterprise level, when it all being probabilistic, you can't have a bunch of agents just communicating through APIs with each other. Like, you need some form of governance, and it's the deterministic processes that have made that possible. And this all comes back to like managing entropy. So like the key to it will be is like Maxwell's demon. Like, if you can have a probabilistic system that reduces entropy, sure, but you need Newtonian laws to do that. Like, the reason that things make sense in the natural sphere and like the cyber sphere gets chaotic is that it's not subject to Newtonian laws. And that's why you could create a programming language that states that 2 + 2 = 5. So yeah, I'm not sure about that. So I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but no, we haven't. Yeah.
DeepSeek. I think with DeepSeek now, I think actually it's feasible for us to actually run these things local. You know, and you're saying about it's the API that's valuable, and it used to be the kind of the model. Arguably now it's the ChatGPT wrappers that are going to have the value, and that's about maybe user interface and all the classic reasons people buy SaaS software and mobile software. Yeah. Because actually the LLM is almost interchangeable, sort of like thing that you can just kind of change for whatever and run it. So it's interesting how, and I guess that's why the whole stock market has crashed with that for NVIDIA and so on, because actually really now it's not so much about the actual models, it's about the experience and everything else.
Yeah, and it's not just about the hardware as well.
We are just talking out of our bums now, aren't we?
Right, I'm going to hand over to you otherwise.
Thank you. Everybody, please give Lewis another warm hand. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And an extra round of applause for you guys for keeping the questions going, keeping the conversation going, because there's so much value in the conversation that comes right after the talks. Yes, so thank you. Does anybody after this feel like a drink? Because we have some over here. And I was just thinking during Lewis's talk that Dry January just ended. So help yourselves. Help yourselves. We'll take a minute before we go into the next talk.
It could end up being Dry January in about 2 minutes. Well, it's honest. Okay. I like
This is a pragmatic session, not a theoretical one.
So I could tap through it just using the keys, or I might use the keys actually. Maybe.
You can use a key, or
Yeah,
you can use
yeah.
this one. Either up to you.
All right.
Totally up to you.
All right.
Worm in your head when you think about it. I've definitely had a beer while giving you.
Okay. All right then, we'll get started again. So come take your seats. We'll start again in just a few seconds. My apologies to the remote audience for disrupting this the flow a little bit here. But up next is the forum's own Pranath Fernando, who's been with us for how many years by now? 5 years, 6 years? Something like that. You've been there from the beginning, from the Brandwatch days. And he's here to remind us that it's not quality assurance that's the only business process in need of AI automation, right? So here to tell us more about automation for business processes, please welcome Pranath.
We can wait for your coffee. Hope it's really good. Thank you. I think we're probably done. Great. Thank you. So, wow, it's great to be back again after a few years, and how much can change in just a couple of years. I think we all know that. Certainly in my life and career, quite a bit has changed. So yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Pranath, and today I'm going to be speaking to you about the AI automation revolution in business. So just a bit about me. So I've worn many different hats in different roles. I've been a web developer for a number of years. I was also a former AI researcher at Sussex, and I've been a data scientist, and also now more recently AI consultant. And I've also worked for sort of quite small AI startups, like in my last full-time position, and I've also worked for kind of large utility companies as well. So at the moment, just to give you a little bit of background about me, I have sort of two sort of separate businesses. One of them is actually kind of like, I suppose I'd call it an education business. And it's basically on Substack. I don't know if you know, it's basically a subscription-based platform. And I have sort of newsletter articles, podcasts, courses, and guides to basically help people learn about AI. And I have over 3,000 subscribers from over 117 countries around the world. So that's really great. And I also separately have an AI automation agency. So that's me delivering AI business services. So part of that is just the consulting side, where I basically advise businesses on what's possible. So I'm also the resident AI expert at the BIPC. So that's a business and IP center at the library. And then I also provide AI automation solutions. And what does this AI automation mean is going to be an important part of this talk. So I'd just like to also give a little bit of a background on how we could think about what AI means for business. And there are a lot of different takes in the media, obviously it's endless amounts, but I'd just like to give you, I suppose, my take on it from two perspectives. And so from the business perspective, a recent McKinsey report estimated about 50% of work is going to be automatable by, let's say, by 2030. Now, I'm sure you've seen a few of these kind of quotes as well. Some they vary hugely, 20%, 30%, whatever. But I think what we can gather from that is there is a significant risk of a certain, significant amount of work basically being automated. I think that's the key takeaway from that. And why? Well, basically because, when AI does work well, and of course it doesn't work for everything, but when it does work well, it just does the job better, quicker, and cheaper. So, that's basically the reason. So I would also say that basically businesses using AI when it's a really good use case are just going to have huge advantage. And I suppose one way to think about it, there's lots of different ways to think about it, but it's almost like, I think it's helpful to start moving towards the idea of kind of regarding them like employees. I mean, obviously with the previous talk, we kind of saw the potential capabilities of these agents, and it's such a really great talk and also laid out their capabilities. But you can see from what he explained as well about their capacity to take actions. And I think that's an important distinction that, made really well. And so that's why I would tag on to that, why I think it could be helpful for businesses to start thinking about, especially AI agents, as AI employees, or certainly starting to move towards seeing them in roles, basically. And another thing I'm sort of seeing across the economy and also just in my own work is, businesses are being very, very slow to adapt to this, or even just to think about it. And what I can see is those that do are, at huge risk of being left behind, and or even losing their entire business. If you have a traditional business that is based on human employee work, some of that business could be automatable. I was actually having an interesting discussion with you earlier where we were talking about sometimes the reluctance to deploy a solution. And one of the considerations is, well, it works, but we're going to lay off a lot of staff. And that's you can understand why a legacy business might think twice about that. But the thing that worries me is, what if I'm a startup business as a competitor? Well, I don't need to worry about that. And, it's just not going to make economic sense. So this is what really worries me, is it's going to be quite, any technology is going to be disruptive, but what I see here is almost like quite dramatic changes in the business landscape, as some businesses that embrace it, use it, and have a huge cost advantage, and those that don't just essentially get, massively outcompeted. So another angle that we don't necessarily always get is the perspective from an employee. What does this mean for work and employment? And again, there, I just worry because I just don't think this is really being covered very well in the media and even in our industry. And, basically, yes, I think people may have a sense that employment is under threat, but I see it a bit more specifically. The whole idea of a job or career or skills for life is dying. One of the things I really liked about what you said was about this whole thing about every 2 years, we need to seriously think about updating our skills. And also another conversation I was having with somebody else, the whole idea of continuous professional development, to be totally honest, sometimes can be like a tick boxing exercise, like, oh, okay, I've done this module. It's like, I think I feel what you were saying, it's quite fundamental, really. We need to really seriously evaluate how we're working. And, it's not just a tweak to what we learned at university, whatever. This is fundamentally learning new ways of working and doing business. And I think this is the best chance you have as a human employee of actually surviving this, basically, and still being relevant. Another quote, people obviously worried about AI all taking my job. And yeah, I would say right now, no, not really. AI isn't going to take your job right now. But I think what's more likely in the near term is someone that knows how to use it probably will. Because they're just going to be more productive. They'll do more and they're more useful to a business. That's it, basically. So so I would definitely advise whatever, especially if you're an employee, to really upskill your game, not even waiting for your employer or manager to tell you. I would be proactive with that and be a leader in your workspace and make suggestions, read up. I think that's how you'll thrive in this new age. And again, just being totally honest, it's just my own perspective. You may agree or disagree, but I actually think there's a better future of being someone who's running their own business than actually thinking of self as an employee, because I just see that as just increasingly unstable or ill-defined. What it means, what's required for a role, is going to be affected by how much more and more AI can do. Maybe you can continually find a niche. Maybe if you're a carer, something like that, maybe your niche is safe for a while. But we've really moved from, especially in the UK and many other, from a manufacturing to services, right? And that is ripe for disruption, really. I mean, even manufacturing with Tesla robots. So yeah, that's my own personal take. You can, maybe that might seem a bit shocking, but I mean, that's, to be quite honest, another reason why I'm creating my own business rather than being employed. I just saw more of a future in me using this technology to offer more to clients, and that I can offer more, and even quite a considerable amount.
Like juggle.
So just a couple of concepts I think it's important to distinguish as well. It's always really useful, as you did as well, just to define some basic concepts. Like AI and automation are often just completely mixed up and bandied as the same thing. I would say they're quite distinct, and I'd just like to give you my definition, although others share a very similar breakdown. So AI, I would say, by the textbook definition, I think it's John McCarthy, early computer scientist, said essentially that it's the science of making intelligent machines, which I think probably most people would understand, makes sense. So another way of thinking about it, it's basically doing complex tasks. So for example, if I was going to do summarization of text, that requires thought and intelligence. And so that's what I would say categorizes AI. It's really categorized by a task that needs intelligence to do it, really. Now, automation, on the other hand, I would define quite differently. It's basically more about just performing simple tasks automatically. So your email autoresponder, when you're not, when you're away on holiday, that's a great example of automation. It's just simple actions, doesn't require any thought or anything clever, but it can still do incredibly useful things. So, and also another aspect of automation is it's essentially like connecting different applications and services. Another thing historically, I mean, obviously AI, we've only really had it, especially the modern form, since 2022. Automation platforms have been going about 15 plus years. So this and this are really quite different. They're kind of merging as well, which makes it confusing. The media really don't have a clue and get it all mixed up, but they are distinct things, even though you can also combine them. So hopefully that makes sense. And essentially, yeah, automation is, I would characterize as no intelligence, basically. So yeah, I'd also just like to give you, and it's taken me a little while to actually develop this, but I wanted to kind of give you a framework for how we might think about AI development and solutions. So, and I've been in all of these three areas and roles, basically. And I think there's something quite different about each of those. So these are ways of how do we build AI solutions, basically, or how do we bring AI to solve business problems? And they all had their pros and cons. So this one is almost like just base level AI, say. So that's using something like ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. So you can actually do a lot of really useful tasks and business tasks with it. And it's great because it's cheap, free, and really easy to use. But one key disadvantage is it doesn't really scale. So say for example, I wanted to summarize the reviews and comments for 100 products. So what do I have to do? Well, I kind of need to copy and paste it into ChatGPT, and I need to do that kind of 100 times. So it doesn't scale very well, basically. So another way of thinking about that is basically ChatGPT, Claude, all these things. They're kind of generic AI tools with a nice, useful user interface. They're designed to be general tools. They're not really optimized for doing specific business tasks, basically. And that's why, even though they're useful, they don't, there's a limitation to how useful they are for business, basically. So custom AI development, on the other hand, is kind of almost like the opposite. So it is completely optimized for doing very, very specific tasks. And it does scale very well because this is where you get a huge team in and, all the infrastructure that you need to make an AI product. So, you can afford to build the infrastructure that you need to, deliver the services at the scale that you need. And you have a very expensive team. You have data scientists, been in that role, web developer, been in that role, designers, back-end engineers, server admins. You know, it's a huge team, hugely expensive wage bill, and very slow to develop. We're talking about weeks, months of development time to, you know, let's say you've got an AI product that you're going to make, so to develop. And here's a really interesting stat. This is from, I think, Forbes. 60 to 80% of enterprise AI projects are currently failing. 60 to 80% fail. If you're interested in some of the reasons, ask me at the end. But they're interesting. But basically, I think that what that's telling you is, like, essentially custom AI development, which is also the standard model for doing other kinds of development, like web development. You know, there's the guys that write code, and there's a whole big team around that. And when it works right, you do a great job for the customer. You make a very, very customized solution that does the job very well. But it's a big bet, and it's big money, and there are big risks. And to be totally honest, for most of my career, I've basically been familiar with this model because it's a traditional technical approach to solving problems in a wide range of domains. This has just popped on the scene a couple of years ago. That's great. And until 6 months ago, I didn't even know about this. And this is what has just blown me away. And just I've pivoted my entire offering towards this. So what is this? So this is AI plus automation. So with this solution, you can build customized solutions for specific tasks in a way that ChatGPT isn't. It scales well because it's kind of no-code solutions or platforms you use. So there's no configuring with servers. There's no libraries to set up. You just drag and drop and set it up very super quick. And yeah, it's incredibly quick, much cheaper to develop and test. The use case of this is right up till now, it's been basically all the enterprise that has been going hell for leather on AI and making a whole pig's breakfast out of it, to be quite honest. But they're big, they can waste that amount of money. SMEs do not have that budget. And so SMEs have really not been able to really get in, even if they were interested. And I've said there's a real reluctance. Those that are face a real barrier because essentially from a cost perspective, all they've really kind of got is ChatGPT. And I've spoken to many of them at the business center. They're really enthusiastic to use it. And it's great. And I've actually got some free courses about how to use this and I can that. But I know that can only get them so far because it's a generic solution. It's not optimized to solve specific business tasks. But these AI automation no-code solutions, you can build entirely customized workflows and tasks and just spin them up very quickly. And because of the reduced cost and speed and time, it's actually a price point that small and medium-sized businesses can easily afford. And that's one of the things I was just super excited about because I just saw in the economy and industry, it just seemed like the big enterprise kind of getting on AI and the small and medium-sized businesses are kind of like, okay, what does this mean for us? And that's awful, really, because, you know, so much of economic growth and that everyone's talking about, a lot of it comes from SMEs. So I'm really excited about what this offers and for me to be offering that. The other thing about this is when you're using AI plus automation or AI or automation, then you only need to use AI or ChatGPT if it's really helpful. One of the biggest mistakes in the analysis of the failure of these big companies, AI projects, is essentially they're treating AI as some magic wand. They don't really understand it, and they're throwing millions, kind of thinking, "Oh, hopefully you'll do that." And they're not really understanding that AI, just like any tool, can do certain jobs really well and is really appalling at other things. So the thing I like about this solution as well is, like, when it makes sense to use a large language model, you can integrate it into the automation workflow. If you don't need it, you're not under any budgetary or expectations to use AI because it's an AI project, which I think is one of the main causes of that as well. And yeah, but basically many business tasks don't need AI at all, as I'll be showing you very soon. So yeah, basically I think one of the best ways, because obviously I've been kind of teasing this AI and automation thing. So what is it really? So I think probably the best way I can help you understand that is to show you just some example business use cases of solutions I've built that businesses have found really useful. Practical, as Oscar says, I think the practical aspect is really helpful. We kind of need theory, but also I think it's just helpful to see some specific examples as well. So, okay, so here's my first example, which I'm actually really fascinated about at the moment. So this is AI personalized marketing emails, which Rose will know about because she's inadvertently received one this week. So what is this? So, okay, just think to your spam folder, got a whole load of horrible stuff in there. And what's horrible about it? Okay, well, one thing is, it's just this junk that is just sent to you that is nothing to do with you, right? It's actually not for you. It's just the same message sent out to everyone, leaving aside the really awful formatting. I don't know why they do that. I mean, it's just, but anyway, so I think that's one of the key reasons. Obviously, it's annoying. If we think about why is it, and the conversion rates are, very low, but, from an informational perspective, actually, to do your point, we're actually presenting each person with a cold generic email with irrelevant information. It's not helpful for them. Now, in more recent years, this is pre-AI, there was some degree of personalization, but of this kind, essentially like you might have with their email, their first name, and you got a little email template, hi, Mark, or whatever it is. And obviously that's a little bit better than the most, complete generic emails. But what I'm talking about with AI personalized emails is a whole nother thing. What I'm talking about is, okay, so you have the lead email, you've got their name. We're going to get some other things. We're going to get their company, their industry, their position. We might look at their LinkedIn for any recent posts. Then we take all that personal information, construct a LLM prompt, and we say, can you give me the first line opener for an email? Think about the industry they're in. Imagine the kind of problems that they would have in their specific industry. Also, if there's an available post, reference that and speak something about that. Talk about like hyper personalized. So for example, you would end up with a unique opener, something like this. So for example, this says, I love the blog on your website, especially the post about how to automate the onboarding process. We'll definitely try it. So, in this case, we would have probably scanned that post from LinkedIn, and we're basically, what we're doing is we're not only personalizing it, one of the things I've learned, I suppose, from marketing essentially recently is like, essentially best way to sell is first put yourself in the position of your customer. Don't tell them about your product first. You need to kind of really think about your customer and their problems first and maybe speak to them. And that's certainly what I've been trying in my recent experiments, is essentially really going very soft, no hard sell at all, really. So, but this is wonderful because I can do this at scale, this individualized, personalized marketing. Well, I'm doing it right now for thousands and thousands and thousands of email at scale. So yeah, just some, I suppose, stats like cold email response rates, roughly estimated to be about 8%. Now, some people are reporting for these AI personalized, hyper-personalized emails, response rates of above or 30%. Now, I haven't verified this for myself yet. My one's currently running. I've got another client campaign I'm working on at the moment. But for me anyway, intuitively, I can see why this might be a little bit more appealing than the kind of stuff that's in your spam folder. And to be quite honest, I actually wouldn't mind receiving one of these because, it might be slightly annoying, but at least they're speaking to me. At least they're saying something in relation to what's uniquely me. So that's a really interesting use case. Another side of that is lead generation. So how do we get these leads? So I use a platform called Make. It's I suppose one of the main platforms I use for these automations, which you can integrate LLMs if you need to, or leave them out. So it's a really, really good platform. The Zapier is another one as well. This automation basically, so for lead generation, this technique scrapes Google Maps as just a really good source of free business information. So that's scraped, and I've put that into a Google Sheet, and then basically I use a email service that essentially. So what I've also got from that Google Map business information is usually I have this website. So in the website, there's a domain. what you could do with this service, I think it's called Snove, you can essentially query for the domain for valid emails at that address, basically. So if that comes back with valid emails, I then create a lead row for each one of these. And this is a very, very enriched lead row, because for every lead, I also have very, very detailed business information, the industry, then whatever, which is absolutely perfect for the kind of email that I need to do before. So this is just kind of a few fallbacks, basically. So if we don't manage to get the verified emails from that provider, basically try and do a web scrape, basically, because we've got the website. So just scrape the website. So this is actually do a regular expression. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically a way of pattern matching. You would just imagine you get all the code for a web page, and it's basically just trying to find if there's any emails in there, basically. That's what use a regular expression for. If that works fine, I add it to the Google Sheet as another lead. If that doesn't work, I was actually experimenting with another thing. So apparently the info at is one of the most common generic emails that usually kind of works for most domains. I'm still not quite sure about that, because the whole thing is it's a generic like email address, and the whole thing about my strategy is about personalization. So I was kind of thinking I might take the bet. Anyway, you get the idea in terms of like, you know, this is a kind of automation, much more complicated automation. And essentially what I've kind of found, being a coder for over 20 years, I'm flabbergasted actually. I mean, you can basically do pretty much most things that you can do in code in this. And also this is the kind of thing that I think, and I have found, is easier to explain to a client, basically, because it's kind of visual. So it's conceptual. And I've been able to explain what the automation does to clients, and they kind of get it. So another sort of feature of these automation tools. So this is another interesting use case. So as I was saying, I was well, I am an AI expert at the BIPC, at the Brighton Library, and when I get a booking for a consultation, this is the wonderful email I get. They were really shocked, because basically I also did the similar presentation, and they were like, oh, I said, this is what I'm getting. This is really hard to figure out. So basically when I get this, what I have to do is basically decipher this garbage, somehow out of this, get their name, the email, the date of the booking. Also, I need a whole lot of other things. I need the client to actually fill in a form, because I need some business details about, you know, what the business is and their problems, because I'm going to, you know, advise them on what, you know, solutions might be possible for them. I also need to schedule in an online meeting, schedule it in my calendar, and also send that all to the client and send them a nice email. So yeah, quite a lot to do. I mean, basically it's really painful when I was doing this manually. I think I did it once or twice. I thought, no, automation, you need to do this by automation. So this is the automation I built. Looks deceptively simple, I'll say that. So essentially this just scans my email box. This is the first LLM call. So this is basically using the OpenAI API to use, I use these days, just GPT 4.0 is quite good actually. Good trade-off for costs and performance. This one is, I quite like this actually. I mean, I was, one of the roles I kind of mentioned, I was a data scientist as well. So whole sort of data formatting extraction is a big thing. One of the really interesting use cases for using LLMs for data extraction is they're really good at like taking a horrible mess of things and actually extracting structured information from it, things in a very inconsistent format. Absolutely fantastic, and it costs like fractions of a penny. It's brilliant. So essentially this LLM API call will basically look at that horrible, terrible mess and extract all the key bits that I need from it. So this phase basically is extracted those bits. This next one is actually generating the super duper customized email that I've made as well. And this just sent it off. So it's deceptively simple, because it's actually quite a lot going in those two. And what is it actually doing? This is the email it ends up creating basically when that automation just triggers. So, hi, Nicholas, thanks for booking the consultation. So to complete the booking, please can you complete this form and, you know, include some business details that will help prepare you for the meeting. So here's the URL for the booking link. There's actually quite a lot going on in this link. So yes, this will book in my calendar, send them a Google Meet, that's out the box. But with all these things in the link, I'm also sending the date of the booking, the time, their name, their email, all to pre-populate the form. So why should they? They've already given me that information in the email, and it's a horrible email. Why don't I work a bit harder with a bit of help from AI to just smooth it all and do that all for them. So when they press on that, basically this is what they see. So it's all scheduled. They don't need to look through some calendar and things. It's already figured out the right time, date. It's pre-populated, the name and an email basically. So all they need to do is essentially put in their business name and their problems, submit it. That's it. Really easy. So yeah, I really enjoyed that automation. It's actually very, very useful for me. Here's a different one. So this is content repurposing. So this is the one I use for me, but this is a generic use case of which there's like infinite variation. So this is the use case where you've kind of maybe got some content somewhere and you want to do something else with it. Think of it like that. And there's infinite variation. This is my personal one. So as I said, I've got this Substack and basically has posts, newsletter guide, tutorials, that kind of thing. This basically taps into the RSS feed. For those of you that don't know, it's just a link of the latest posts, basically the last 20. What this will do is randomly select one of those latest 20. Then it will send it two ways. It sends it to, again, another OpenAI API call, but two different ones. Why? Because I'm creating a customized, individualized post for different social media platforms. Why do I need two LLM calls? Because essentially, different platforms have a different style of social media posting. I mean, LinkedIn tends to be a bit longer. Facebook's just different, has a different style, and Twitter's obviously super short. So essentially, this is creating a customized version of the post, and actually, it's not just a summary or something like that. I've done a lot of work on that. I did kind of version 10 of the prompt, as it were. So I've been multiple iterating, and essentially, this is what it's doing. So this is just essentially promoting me all the time. It kind of posts twice a day, actually. And just to give you an idea of like how well is it doing. So basically, I used to post kind of quite irregularly, as most people who has time to post on a regular time and date, even though we know that we should be doing that. I did okay, not too bad. How has this been doing? I mean, it's been getting 4 times the amount of engagement and likes. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's quite sad in a way. I'm not insulted, but it's actually writing better than I am. And that's something, I mean, I'm on Substack, so I know a lot of writers. It's something a lot of creatives have a lot of anxiety about. It's like, I'm comfortable with being honest. It writes better than me, or certainly social media posts. But I don't mind because it's kind of promoting my content. So who am I to complain? So yeah, this has been really successful for me. And I did a variation for a client recently, very different, not AI writing. She wanted to write in her own voice. So the automation there was to schedule in a spreadsheet. She would write her content in her own voice. It was important to her, which is fine. And then she's a photographer, so she had the photos. What was helpful for her is she has dyslexia, and she also finds it really difficult to have regular time. So what it does is when she does have time, she just keeps populating it. And then this is basically acting like a social media manager. It will just diligently take the next post, send it out at the right time and place. And she said it's really helped her a lot. So do think of this as a kind of general use case. This is just my particular one. That was her one. It's essentially, there's so many different ways you can essentially, this content repurposing use case, basically, which is a very, very popular one as well. So I must speed up. Little eye on time. Okay. Chatbots. Now, there's lots of different like chatbot solutions out there. And, you know, when I was at the AI startup, different one there, you know, tend to be quite involved on the code side, quite expensive, bit complicated. Here's a super simple one in an automation, basically. So this one actually connects with Telegram. I mean, it could connect with anything. Slack has over 5,000 integrations with common applications. And so what are the kind of use cases? Well, I'm sure don't need to tell you too much about like the customer service side. I mean, you know, whether that's on website or social media channels or other channels like Slack, the customer service side can be really useful. It can even do other things, not just provide relevant information, even do lead capture and things like that. But another interesting use case that often is overlooked is actually for internal staff training or onboarding, which is another real like time killer in terms of like business costs and resources. And I've seen it actually used really well in that use case. And that's just internal facing basically. And it's customized with whatever the procedure and process for onboarding or training or, you know, that kind of thing. So that's a really interesting use case. And it's essentially can start off as a relatively simple AI automation that could get a bit more sophisticated depending on the needs. Here's another interesting use case, is basically invoice processing. So, you know, you get your invoices, typically you might have someone receiving them by email. Then some poor soul has to open the PDF, look at all these inconsistently formatted PDFs, find what the line items are, copy them over to a spreadsheet, put it, and do that for all the different invoices, which are going to be differently formatted, so that there is basically a sheet or table in a database. This basically just does it automatically. So in this bit, again, this is just one particular iteration. It could be variations. In this one, in the Google Sheet, you've basically got a link to the PDF doc that's being uploaded to Google Drive, and essentially this just processes all of them. This uses this module, which is actually an API service as well. It'll just parse the PDF. So in this sense, it's kind of helped it, because I mean, ChatGPT itself can't take a PDF format itself. Not in the API call that I was doing anyway, but this basically parses it into as more of a textual representation. It's still inconsistent because all invoices are for some reason. And then ChatGPT is fine at actually extracting what are the fields that we want in a consistent way, regardless of the way the invoice is formatted, and just parsing that into a JSON and then shoving that into an invoice spreadsheet that's consistent with all the information, which is what a person would be doing. And, you know, it's quite a painful job. Why not automate it? And the final automation, this is another, I suppose, unfortunate use case. I don't know how lucky you are. Basically, people not paying their invoices. It happens. Let's admit it. And what a pain in the ass. And let's just say maybe a lot of people will pay it up, you know, when you chase them a bit. But it's kind of, you know, a bit of a time, but also emotional drag, right? So here's an automation that can make all that history. So basically, this is basically taking a Google Sheet, could be anything, whatever, like, but essentially it's a record of all your invoices. It knows when they were due. And then basically what this automation does is, so you can, again, I've just made this trigger at certain points. It's completely arbitrary, could be configured anyway. I think I've done it 7 days, late 14, 30, and 60. Wow, very generous. Okay. And essentially each one of these, you'll notice there's no like ChatGPT model. There is no AI needed here. It's essentially a template that whoever the business owner has decided, I want to send this kind of email at 7 days, basically. So basically I'll have template values where you can put in the name, the invoice amount. You know, it's fairly generic, but the job is not to be attracting clients. The job is to kind of encourage the people who are your clients to pay up, basically. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. So essentially, yeah, that is just triggering at these well-defined points, basically, and just automatically chasing up your late invoices. And of course, there's multiple ways you could customize this. You could maybe, you know, when it's getting really serious, and maybe have a path that is basically emailing a member of staff to maybe alert them, okay, this one's getting very late, I think it needs a bit of human intervention here. So this is just a very, very rough way. This could be completely customized, and this is something obviously ChatGPT can't do, but this takes a fraction of the time to build than you would any like traditional code-based AI application, basically. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. So I think that's it. So if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's a QR code. I basically post about what's on my Substack. I have podcasts as well and post about that. And my AI automation is posting twice a day, all of them there. So if you can figure out which is me and which is it, you might get a prize. And basically, if any of you are interested in basically a bit of advice on how, you know, what the AI automation potential might be for you, then this is a QR code to the booking link. So that's me done.
Yeah, no, give Pranath a warm hand. Thank you very much for that, Pranath, for those. What were those 7 concrete tools for business automation? Does anybody? Oh, there's already a question for. Let me just. Sorry, Mark. Before you, can I just ask? Is there any remote questions from the remote audience? We got a comment. I think my brain melted, but it was very interesting. The brain? No. Here's your first question, Pranath.
Hi. So all those things there, we've been doing those, and we use LLMs and RAG and whatever to do kind of our client status reports and all that. And I did use it also to do posts to LinkedIn and all that. But do you not think though that these days it's actually the actual real value, the real kind of thing is in the authenticity of actually something that is personally written? You know, because you can churn out, and we've done it ourselves, churn out all these kind of like posts that kind of, you know, repost content, and they've got really good stuff on there. But people can spot when it's done by an LLM. And I've tried doing a consulting engagement where I've used ChatGPT to write part of the content, and customers see it straight away. And in a way, I suppose in a way, is the value in future going to be in stuff that is clearly not written by an LLM, right? Yeah, people will be aware of when it is done by an LLM, and it's authenticity that people look for in the end. And that's where when you've got, I suppose, no scarcity about content, it's content that's actually written by somebody that's really valuable. I think that's what I found really, and that's why we employed a kind of intern to do our posts in the end, because it's real.
Yeah, that's really yeah, it's well, I would also say it's a very, very important topic that a lot of people talking about on the platform I was on, Substack, which is like 2% techies and like 95% creatives and writers. They're extremely vexed about this. So I've had many conversations. Just to give you my take, so from my perspective, I have a different take on it. How can I put it? Like, I'm not an inherent human superiorist. You know, I don't think humans are just fundamentally superior. I think what matters is what works for people. And when I say people, I don't just mean the audience. I actually mean for the people creating the content as well. And with regards to the idea that AI content is is inferior and anyone can spot it, in my experience, that's not true actually at all. I think, because I mean, literally, I've seen it not only in the results of my prompt. I mean, basically, it's the LLM and the kind of prompt that can drastically affect the quality of the textual output as well. For example, Claude is generally the better one in terms of most human-like prose, and with respect, I think that's slightly based on a assumption that I don't share, which is seeing an LLM like a machine. I agree with more your perspective in terms of probabilistic. It isn't deterministic, it's probabilistic. So it's quite varied. It's affected by a whole number of things. And one of the things that most greatly affects the quality of the textual output is the prompt that you actually put in. It isn't necessarily, so really to be able to answer that more comprehensively, you would need to see lots of examples of people writing good prompts and the output from that, and poor prompts. And I would say I've seen a very wide range. And I would say I've seen many examples of people writing good prompts. And most people on my LinkedIn seem to think I'm posting a lot of these posts, and I haven't a lot of them, and they like them more than mine. So that's what I would say.
Right. Take that, you human supremacists.
That makes sense. Yeah. Isn't it people that decide the value? Like, so for example, if you had a piece of artwork, is the value, I like it, or is the value, oh, the human made it, that has value to me? And for me, I think the answer is there's not one answer, because I think people are different and value different things.
This is where the holder share comes in. You know, it's when you go to the actual performance, it's actually the performance that's carrying out in the individual's head that is arguably more important than the performance itself. So, and that's it. The guy who's speaking at the next conference, Neil.
To the remote audience, half of that conversation is also interesting.
But yeah, like, the only thing I would say is that there's like the guy who's speaking at the next, Neil Seth, whatever, he always quotes this book called The Age of Insight, and it brings up it's the beholder's share. So like the conversation that you're kind of having there is like, well, who's deriving, like, how do you derive value from that piece of content? And I suppose, Mark, you said that it was, you know, it's effectively the consumer. But anyway, yeah, it's just, that's an interesting framework that you can kind of deploy upon it. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I've got some empirical evidence to kind of show people seem to prefer the AI generated content over my posting, but also other people's. So that's all I can say. But not everybody will, and I guess that's my point.
Yeah. I'm loving the conversation. So I'm going to go with Ash first, and then.
Yeah, I guess this follows on from the conversation you just had. Pranath, I've not actually had a proper conversation with you for a few years, probably since you started your first data job. And on LinkedIn recently, I've been like, oh, Pranath's up to something interesting. And I wasn't like, oh, this is clearly AI, which probably says a lot more about me than anything else. But yeah, I found it quite engaging. And
I've been working on that prompt a lot.
But yeah, really interesting talk. Yeah, thanks.
On that subject, I quite often write to my MP, a bit of a moaner in that way. And I hope they're using AI to summarize and to respond. And in fact, I said that in my last email because it's Peter Kyle and they just announced a big AI thing. And I said, I hope you're using AI to process all these emails to get the most value out of them. And I really don't mind if they're using AI to respond because it can do it far more efficiently and it's much more, So in some cases, I think it is superior. Yes.
I suppose I'd only add, like, to clarify, like, I don't have a bias for using it or against using it. I have a bias towards what works and what people want and what people like.
I think your talk was really interesting, and I think you're in a quite unique position with your work history in that you've done web development, and you've done consultation and everything else, and you're kind of, it's the perfect time for you to take the task on that you've done and to create a business in the way that you've done. One of the things that I found very interesting was on one of the early slides when you were talking about 60 to 80% of AI projects fail.
Shocking.
And I was doing web development in the 90s, and I'm sure you were as well. And a lot of the work that we would have got was from clueless directors who go, we must have a website. And then people like me would make a lot of money by building what they asked for. And they would have made a lot of money if they'd listened to me and built something that was useful. But they're the people making the decisions about what their product should do, how it should work, because they're ill-informed, and that's understandable. I think that's fair. But what happened to websites over the years was that they became kind of the same thing, and people kind of stopped innovating how a website would be when you got there, because finding out how to contact somebody, where the products were, scheduling, anything really, could be behind something that you roll over, then click on, then something else, and then something else. And it would be over-designed, right? And I think that the way that websites ended up being built was that they became very standardized. Would you agree that there's room left, or we're currently in a situation where that standardization, that normalization of the build of what the product is going to be, is in a process of settling down to become something so that instead of everybody innovating, they're saying, well, actually, this pattern is successful and this approach is successful. Let's use the tools that we've got. We don't have to build everything from scratch. We can plug together some nice units, some nice services together. And then what we'll do is we'll build something which is familiar, reliable, and not constantly a challenge like a website from 1997, basically.
Yeah, I'd just basically agree with you. I mean, I suppose a way I'd put it is it's a bit like trying to build a house, and let's just say the design of houses is changing over time. That's the thing that builders need to keep up on. But now in this situation, the analogy is the tools are changing at the same time as well. and it's not even houses. It's kind of like, I don't know, igloos or subterranean mole houses or whatever. So basically, because everything, the fundamentals are changing of what you build with as well as what you are building. That's why we have the chaos. And so, for example, I've just been experimenting with a different agent platform. So when I was at the AI startup, I was using LangChain, for example, and you have ultimate control over all aspects with that. And that is probably a downside of, let's say, the automation. It's inevitably is a trade-off, and there's a more limited customization, inevitably. So the thing is, it's like, you know, in terms of the major advantage of this and no code, it's like the speed, deployment. Oh my God, you know, those are big pluses, right? So where is that trade-off? I think it probably depends on the business use case. But right now, I think it's too early to have settled at that stage. And that's why we have this approach, which still makes sense for a lot of business use cases, the low-level control on writing the code, because ultimately that's where you have the fine-grained control. So I couldn't really build anything like the complexity, I would say, within a kind of no-code agent solutions. It's the same one. I've actually forgotten the name. Is Rose here? Oh, Rose is here. But yes, so it's. I think it's just too complex for us to have settled on a set of tools to have reached that maturity that the products themselves. And to be quite honest, I don't see that settling anytime soon. Just because the capabilities of LLMs are just so fast, the scaling laws. So scaling laws are the make it bigger, can do more, seem to be holding. Obviously, the whole DeepSeek thing is interesting because it's saying, oh, you don't necessarily have to builder to have more capability. But I don't think it generally takes away from the general thesis that, you know, generally more data, more building, perhaps with more smarter scaling down, but there's still more road to run with this, essentially, both in terms of what the tools will be and also what we're going to build. And I think it's too early for it to be that settled, I suppose, from what I can see.
More questions? Yeah, one here.
Yeah, thanks. Right on your first slide, you were talking about like the job squeezes and where AI might start to eat up existing roles or parts of roles. Where on sort of a e-commerce team or digital team, anyone that runs a website with a sales funnel, these sorts of things, do you think that squeeze is coming fastest?
I think those roles are some of the first. To be quite honest, if you think
about
what
I see on like podcasts, commentary, LinkedIn, anything that you read, even Mark Zuckerberg on the podcast the other day saying, programming jobs are the first to go.
Yeah.
If I look at my own role, which is like half programming, half middle management,
yeah,
to me it seems like the middle management side is by far the easier one to automate. Like, with the kinds of automations that you're demonstrating there, I can, make something that chases people for Jira tickets on Microsoft Teams probably in 2 days with Python.
Absolutely.
Versus, integrate Apps Flyer or, sort out Google Tag Manager is a 5-month infinitely complex project with 28 stakeholders and like deep lines of code.
Yeah.
Yeah. A very broad question.
That
but
makes
like,
sense to me.
Where does it seem like it's going to be eaten up fastest?
I don't think it's, I mean, generally, yes, I'd agree with you, but I think it's not all. I think our intuition isn't necessarily always the best guide in terms of the ones that seem like simple tasks and the ones that seem more complex. So, for example, as I think I was talking to someone a bit earlier in terms of the code capability, so you could regard that as quite a specialized, detailed task that it's not too bad on, but like I use it, for example, for doing low-level coding and maybe validating my code if I'm ever writing it. I would never like do a whole class or implementation of something. So there's like degrees of sometimes I think, yes, in your case, it does make sense, but I think it's almost like a case-by-case basis for each role and job. What do you really do in your job? And it's kind of like, oh, did you know you could actually do that? And oh, that thing, we're nowhere close to, being able to replicate that. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. And to be quite honest, I think people have hardly even started to look at human roles and start to think in terms of what could be done. I think we're just scratching the surface.
All right. Oh, yes, one more here. Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. I guess my question is, in terms of where you see this heading, because I think there is this recursive complexity that you could apply where you can get really granular with things that you automate in your life. So let's say, like in theory, you could take all the data that you collect through your smartwatch and your online socials and profiles and anything that you have that you can access, and then create some kind of automation that finds the best optimizations for your life, and then it tries to do that in a way that, like, how granular, my question is, how granular do you think this can go in terms of optimizing people's life, and to what level will it be useful? And because obviously the more complexity, the more random things that you could automate that might not be useful could appear. So I'm just kind of thinking, where do you think this is going, and how granular and advanced could this stuff get in people's lives?
So yeah, I've got two answers to that. I think the first answer is, so I also have a science background, so I very much believe in the whole testing validation. That was music to my ears when I for you, and it's something that's often sometimes can be left out. And so in terms of like, oh, I could automate this thing in my life if I connect to this, it's kind of like, that's the naive hypothesis that most people make in my lives. But I think the more critical thing is you won't really know until you actually build it. So some of these use cases, people will think, oh, this could, and you won't really know until you actually do it, whether it's actually helping you. And maybe it's because it can't quite do the thing in the way that you expect. Or maybe it's doing what you exactly want. It's just the effect on you might not have anticipated. So that's my first answer. It's like, I think it's going to be a lot of experimentation. That's the only way people are going to know. I think there's no way of somebody going, oh, this will work. You have to do it, basically, like a lot of things in business. I think the second answer I have is a bit interesting, and it slightly touches on, I think, what Lewis was sort of giving the flavor of, which is like, when you create these, the more complex systems there are, the more unpredictable they are. Completely deterministic logic, but LLMs by themselves are fundamentally probabilistic, not deterministic. And then you're connecting lots of multiple agents that are far more complex in terms of how they're interacting, defined, the actions they can take. You know, the number of permutations just explode, right? So I think people are just going to do that. They're just going to build more and more things and more complex things. The only thing is, I think some of those more complex things might actually work. We can't rule that out. But again, I think I would just come back to the whole testing methodology. And people will do that anyway. As this stuff becomes more accessible, people will start using it more. They'll try it out more. They'll overdo it like they do with so many other things in life. And what doesn't work will become obvious. So I think it's that experimental testing, although I think it's helpful if people do it more consciously than unconsciously, in terms of like, I think this could work, but I'm going to try it out, rather than this will work, and then get hugely disheartened and think, oh, this whole technology is crap, when actually it may be just that thing. So I think a little actually conscious awareness of the experimental mindset means that if it doesn't work, you don't think the entire technology is at fault just because one particular automation I tried didn't work, basically. So I think that's helpful. So.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a tendency.
So I've taken that to extreme. I've got 10 years worth of data on absolutely everything of my life, which I've been recording so through rescue time and everything. And so certainly it's been great for having complete total recall of anything. So I've got all this in a BigQuery database, and I can remember anything in detail from last 10 years. But the other side to it, you're saying about agents and systems being out of control. I've got, like, at home, I've got smart,
less predictable.
Yeah, I've got smart things. I've got Home Assistant. I've got Home Assistant connected to an LLM, and I've got smart things and also the Google Assistant. And I can't turn my heating off because there's about 3 systems that are all controlling the heating. I'm not exaggerating. Something's controlling the heating.
Sounds like a good case for de-automation.
It is, yeah. And there are so many different agent systems running in the house that have all the smart stuff.
My philosophy is, if it isn't useful, don't use it.
The heating comes on at certain times, and I can't turn it off. So it's kind of interesting, like, control of all these agents, really.
I mean, I'm not like a automation evangelist. I'm a more like pragmatic evangelist. It just happens to use automation if it helps. That's really what I'm about. Like, not about using, and that's one of the great things I like about automations is I'm not shilling AI for everything, really not, and I don't need to. If I can just connect a Google Sheet to, I don't know, a text message thing, and there's no AI, and if it helps somebody, that's what. So I would think for you, it's kind of like, it's great. I almost like feel like you're so willing to embrace experimentation, but ultimately, if it doesn't work for you, that could work. Maybe connect it to LinkedIn. That could be great. Awesome.
Well, very interesting conversation. Absolutely loving it. My basic question: while automation, AI, fantastic, we have amazing capabilities of aggregating data, processing data, and end results. As someone who's putting these things into market, there's a fine line between personalization and hyper-personalization, where you could actually throw off your customer if you're personalizing it too much.
Can you give me an example? Do you have
For
in mind?
example, like if I receive an email saying, "Oh, Miss Antra, you bought something like this," and you would bought.
Do you mean like when it gets a bit creepy? That
Exactly,
kind of thing?
exactly.
All right.
Too
It's a
much
thing.
information.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How, like, as a person who's enabling these kind of automation, how would you define that fine line that you do not throw your customer off the game?
I would define that fine line for me and the client I was working in, knowing I'm not defining that fine line for everybody. Because I think it's quite individual. Like, I mean, I would say probably in terms of the creepiness, I think there's probably a level that most people probably agree is a bit too creepy. But I don't think it's some hard, like, scientific definition. I think it's just hopefully something most people have a sense.
I mean, it gets creepy if you just Google search about yourself. Just go on Google and type your name and the amount of information you have.
Well, I suppose what I would distinguish is we have before AI, we have 10 to 15 years of, I'll try and be fair, like hyper-personalized based social media, good use cases. I'm sure there's some. It's not fashionable to say that. I'm sure there are some. And also the really bad use cases, right? So in a sense, there's more power with this, I think, with the AI hyper-personalization, because you're not just using the personalized data to, sell them garden products. You're speaking to them in a personal way about them. And that has more potential benefit to connect better with people, but also more, as I think we're hinting at, like more danger for abuse. So for example, like for me personally, like there is some, like, okay, this is my personal preference. Like, even though in that example, I used the blog post example, and that's something quite a few similar people doing what I'm doing are doing. Personally, I just don't feel right doing it. Like, that feels a little bit too creepy for me personally. Whereas I recognize for a client, lots of other people think that's fine. If you think about it, it's like, it's a public post, right? I'm not like crawling their computer or something like that. It's a public post on LinkedIn. But just for me personally, don't want to go. I feel much more comfortable trying to use the personal information about their position and the industry to empathize with the problems they're having at work. Like, that's what I think I want to connect with, not I saw your post so much. So that's just me.
Right, and I want to thank you for raising that point on the ethics and the possibility of misuse and the exposure of vulnerable populations, for instance. Because that's certainly a thought that we who consider ourselves professionals in the space should definitely be keeping high in our consciousness as we use and build with these tools. So I think I want to thank you especially for raising that point. But we are running out of time. We have to get going. So please give Pranath a great warm hand of thanks, gratitude. And give it up for Lewis. And for yourselves, because you've spun great conversation. Thank you for that. That is always my favorite part of this of these meetings, is the kind of conversation we can spin up. And speaking of, Now what happens is that we're all going to stand up, turn around and head out this door and go to Unbarred and sit down and have a proper conversation. I just have questions for you, Pranath and Lewis. You guys coming over to the pub?
For a little bit. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Speakers, your drinks on me, thank you. Second of all, would you be happy to share with this fantastic audience, would you be happy to share your slides with them?
Sure.
Thank you, perfect. In your case in particular, hard to read something. Anyway. So, perfect, thank you. So the slides will be shared via link on the Slack space. So please come and join our workspace to delve into the full details of what we've been raising here tonight. Final point, Lewis's workplace employer, Rittman Analytics, has left some swag for you guys on the table by the name tags. Say it again? No, what do you mean? This is actual swag. We usually don't have swag. We have swag tonight for you guys. I mean, I'm thrilled. Anyway, go grab that on the way out. I hope to see you over at Unbarred after this. But if not, then thank you so much for coming. I hope this has been the Brighton Data Forum. I hope to see you at our next event. And I just want to remind you, you probably are the right audience for this event of Brighton AI. In 1 week's time, Anil Seth is there. Have you heard of this guy?
Yeah, being used, fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. He's an author, TED speaker, professor, neuroscientist at Sussex. He's in this area and he's coming to Brighton AI. So go, grab the opportunity to see him. But this is it for the Brighton Data Forum tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.